Yes, I'm live. Good morning, good morning, good morning, Arts and Humanities class. This is day 3 of this adventure in the coronavirus. I want to extend my good wishes to you all. Hope that you're all feeling well and hope that you're finding ways to A, stay healthy, and B, stay happy in these era of in this experiment with coronavirus. Not experiment, but this ordeal with the coronavirus. And speaking of that, you know, just know that one day this will be over. It will be over, and our life will return to normal, if there is such a thing. We just have to try to make sacrifices, small sacrifices. I mean, I spend a lot, I spend way too much time thinking about things like that. But for example, as I watched this virus grow, when it began? Sometime in February, they first began getting reports in China of that. And as I watched it grow, one of the things that really I wondered about was, what is this virus doing in the developing world? For example, I was watching Saturday night. I was watching Slumdog Millionaire, a movie, of course, which is about this one young man in India winning Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and it shows how he came across the answers. Forgive me for touching my face. I can't help it. You have a nose itch, you just can't. But how this young man was able to know answers to all these questions. And in so many of the scenes in watching this, I was impressed by what life in India was like. The masses of people, and it's not just India, it's other countries as well, where you have large masses of people who live in close confinement, and they can't get away from other human beings. In our country, hunkering down, sheltering in place may be an inconvenience, but in those countries, doing those things, I think it's an impossibility. Not only that, I wonder about not only the ability of those countries to test and to care for those who are sick. I wonder about the reporting. How legitimate is the reporting? Can they report? How many people in those countries suffer and die pretty much in silence? And so, I know it sounds corny. I know it sounds like something you've heard a zillion times before, but never stop appreciating that even in these times of shortages of toilet paper, we still have pretty cushy in this country. To be real honest, if you are bored, there's always something to do, something to occupy your mind with. Most of you have some kind of television or internet that you can basically go out and explore the world virtually, and you can receive your schooling virtually. And so, there is that. But anyway, I'm happy to have you all back this morning. And today we're going to talk about this thing called the Protestant Reformation. Reformation really is one of the greatest events in the history of not just Western man, but in mankind all put together. Protestant Reformation was the first time really when someone stood up, and once again, Martin Luther is what he is. He is anti-Semitic. He drank too much beer. He stood aside and watched people be slaughtered and the city of Rome and all of its artworks burned. He is what he is. And yet, he's also this guy who stood up against the strongest, most impressive institution of the world at that time, the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church. And so when you talk about Martin Luther, I mean, yeah, like I said, he's not perfect. He's not, some kind of idol, but he begins this idea of questioning authority, that just because somebody says you have to do this, you have the right to say, but is that right? Is that right for me? And that questioning, by the way, will not just affect religion, it will pour over into revolution, the great democratic revolutions, the French Revolution, for example, and of course the American Revolution. The idea of questioning authority when you think something is, not right, and that will later convert into social movements of social protest. The idea that women have the right to vote, for example, things of that nature. And so, anyway, let's talk about this. And so, I always talk to my AP Euro students, and I say, "Are you guys ready for class?" And I take inventory. Are you ready for class? We're having class now. So, what do we need to be ready? Well, let's see. Number one, pen. Well, if you want to take your notes in pencil, I guess that's up to you, math geek. But I'm being funny. But hopefully you have your study guide somewhere printed out so you can, of course, not just read what is on there. I mean, it's a pretty skimpy textbook, even though it is, my affirmations about the subject matter, but also other necessities, such as Kleenex for me, because allergies are just killing me. And last but not least, got to keep it handy. Hopefully, while we're talking about this, I'm sure that your parents or you have went to stores looking for this and you can't find it. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. The stocks will eventually come back. I mean, yeah. The stocks of this, the stocks of toilet paper, the stocks of food stuff, it will come back. The problem that's happening now in this country with these things, I'm off the subject again, I'm sorry. The problem that's happening now in the country with these things is hoarding. People getting 10 of these when they only need 2, and eventually even the hoarders will have enough. They'll get to the point where having 10 4-pack rolls of toilet paper, they'll say, well, maybe I've got enough toilet paper for a while. And so eventually the stocks will go back up of everything. It's just a matter of not, right now, it's an inconvenience. And forgive me for that, for going off on that tangent. So back to the matter at hand. So we're talking about here the beginnings of the Protestant Reformation. It is the 3rd page of your study guide, where it goes from the, see how dark this is to how light that is, okay? All right, this leads us to where we are now, 1517, and a guy named Martin Luther, 95 Theses, church door in Wittenberg in what is now Germany. Western Europe was the domain of the Roman Catholic Church, which in 1517 was not only a church, but the Roman Catholic Church was a political entity. It could tell people what to do with their secular lives. It could make laws. It could physically punish, literally unto death, those who would not comply. Do keep in mind that the penalty for going up against the Catholic Church during this time was a crime known as heresy. 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 And the punishment for heresy was to be burned at the stake. And it was a punishment that got dealt out a lot during this time. And so, yeah, was being burned at the stake. And Martin Luther and others like him, like Jan Hus, were going to face this. So, and also, the Roman Catholic Church was the richest institution in the Western world. And like I've said many times when we discuss the Roman Empire, the old saying goes that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Pardon me. Yes, this is another important thing for conducting class. But the Roman Catholic Church had been number one, had been the most powerful for quite some time. And as you know, it had basically been sullied, dirtied. Its reputation had been tarnished by, study guide, the Crusades. In the end, the Crusades all came up to a bust. I mean, the Crusades were supposed to free the Holy Land for Christianity and do all those kind of things, and every one of them eventually ended in failure. Cost hundreds of thousands of lives, massive destruction, lots and lots of money. And so, yeah. And then there was the Black Plague. Now, of course, the Roman Catholic Church didn't cause the Black Plague. But at the same time, when the Black Plague came in 1347 and killed from anywhere between 1/2 to 3/4 of the population of Europe, as some estimates have told us, people, of course, in times of need, in times of desperation, look to their leadership. I mean, for example, in this thing's going on now, I watch the leadership, our governors, the leaders of the Boone County School Board, and of course the president. What are you going to do? And so people of Europe at that time, when the Black Plague hit, they turned to the Roman Catholic Church and they said, what are you going to do? What can we do? How can we take this away from us? And the Roman Catholic Church, remember, the Roman Catholic Church told everyone and made everyone believe that they had, a direct phone line to God, and that God talked to them, and that anything the Roman Catholic Church said was the will of God coming down. And so, what do you do? The Roman Catholic Church, and we've talked about this before, came out with all kind of interesting ideas. They said, well, this plague is caused by sin. Stop sinning. Go to Mass more. Mass. Congregating. Now, you and I both know that the Black Death was caused by fleas transported on the backs of rats, and those fleas then hopped on to human hosts, and all it took was those human hosts to start congregating together in Mass at church, and the fleas hopped on to new hosts. And, of course, going to Mass, going to confession, doing acts of contrition, none of those things seemed to help. And, then the Catholic Church, stop having sex. Well, that didn't help. Okay, wait a minute. Sex is an affirmation of life. Have lots of sex. Obviously, that didn't help either. I know. You know that this plague is from Satan, and it's caused by witches. Witches are always accompanied by cats. And it was called the Great Cat Massacre. And in some towns, they killed every cat in the town. Cats were one of the few things that kept the rodent population down, and the rodents were the carriers of fleas, so, that's where that went. More rats, more fleas, more plague. And so the plague went on. The bottom line of the whole thing was, though, that here the Roman Catholic Church was saying, we got all the answers. Plague comes along, they got zero answers. And it made people tend to, look at the Roman Catholic Church and say, maybe you don't have all the answers. Maybe I need to look somewhere else for my answers. They began to question whether or not the Roman Catholic Church had everything. that they claim to have. And so, yeah. Then, of course, the Roman Catholic Church had become such big business, part number 3, become such big business that there were power struggles within the Roman Catholic Church. It was not unusual for popes to be assassinated by other people who wanted to be popes. And it became a pretty common thing that this corruption, this power mongering, will trickle down in the hierarchy of the church, trickle down to the local priesthood. For example, it was very common in European towns and villages to see the local priest. And by the way, during this point in time, during this time in history, there were people lining up to be priests. Today, the Roman Catholic Church has to recruit priests for the United States from other countries. People just don't have that desire to be priests anymore. And you might ask, well, why? Well, to be a priest is a life where one makes sacrifice. But during this time, being a priest meant that you, A, got 3 square meals a day, B, didn't have to work, C, had a warm cot to sleep in, and compared to the average Joe, being a priest had a pretty good lifestyle. Didn't have to engage in warfare, didn't have to stand guard at night or at the gate of the city, didn't have to pay taxes. And so, yeah, being a priest meant that, your life wasn't that terrible. And so, getting back to the matter at hand, people would run into priests who, for example, couldn't even read. You see, it was important to read. Most people couldn't read. The great majority of the people in Europe prior to the Protestant Reformation couldn't read. And by great majority, I mean like 95% of the population could not read. Priests were supposed to be able to read so that they could read not only the Bible, but directives from the Holy See, the Pope, and tell them how to live their lives. Well, priests who couldn't read, not only priests who could read, but it was also not uncommon to see priests walking about and forth around the towns with 2, 3 women following them and an entourage of children. Now, you might say, well, what would, and by following them, I mean that this was their personal concubines. They couldn't marry them, but they could keep them. Why? Because they were allowed to. It was a violation, obviously, is a violation of a priest vow of celibacy. Priests are supposed to be celibate, but priests, some priests, not all priests, flaunted it pretty much out in the open. And that was the image. The church was taking an image beating. And then, finally, the corruption in the church, it also became more and more obvious to the people that the church was interested in money. Everybody, if you lived in Western Europe, if you lived in the Roman Catholic domains, which basically is from Poland all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, you had to pay tithes, T-I-T-H-E, tithes, T-I-T-H-E, which is the Old English spelling, which means 10. Tithe is 10% of your income. Everybody had to cough up 10% of their income to the Roman Catholic Church. And if everybody coughs up 10% of their income, that's quite a bit of money. Now, the thing of it was, though, the great majority of that money then was loaded into carts and shipped to Rome. It left the kingdom. And so a lot of people, not just the people who were giving up the 10%, but a lot of the members of the local governing leadership, a lot of the lords, a lot of the merchants, were very jealous of the fact that every week, 10% of the money, every week, every month, whatever, 10% of the wealth of their kingdom, their village, got shipped out to Rome. For what? So the Pope could live in the grandest house on the planet. Yeah. So anyway, back to the matter at hand. And it seemed more and more that the church was more interested in money than anything else. Then, of course, finally, there's this thing called indulgences. Now, there's a fine point here. What are indulgences? Indulgences are a practice that is still actually conducted by the Roman Catholic Church. Now, hold on. Don't get all fired up if you're Catholic. Don't burn me at the stake. But see, an indulgence is something given to someone that reduces that person's time in purgatory. Purgatory, what's that? It's a town out west. Three levels of the universe, according to Dante's Inferno, and according to the Catholic hierarchy of the Middle Ages. 3 levels. There is heaven, there is purgatory, and then there is hell. Purgatory is like, and I've said this before, purgatory is like a giant waiting room, the universe's biggest waiting room that has no chairs to sit in and no interesting magazines. And the idea was that, after you died, you would spend time in purgatory, and the length of that time would be based on the number of sins you had committed during your life. Now, yes, when you went to confession, you get forgiveness of those sins, but with forgiveness, you still had to spend time in purgatory. And, indulgences to a very small degree, people can still get dispensations for doing certain acts. But yeah, indulgences to a certain degree are still carried out today. Forgive me, I had to move. And, think of this. You're getting to sit on your bed or at your kitchen table watching this lecture in the comfort of your own home. Perhaps you have one of these or something else. But here was the problem. The Roman Catholic Church came up with this great idea. Why don't we have people pay for indulgences? The church announced a sale on indulgences. And to be frank, who wouldn't want one? It was a great marketing technique. You could buy time out of purgatory. The idea was, it's a very complicated idea, and Rick Steve talked about this, that the saints and the prophets and all the people in the Bible who were, the people that the Bible holds up to emulate, had committed more than enough good deeds to get them into heaven. And the church basically said, you can buy some of these favors, these indulgences, for a certain amount of money. And so the church announced the sale of indulgences in 1517. We'll see, look what it says. Indulgences are forgiveness of sins which one commits, which can relieve a person from purgatory's punishment. You didn't want to hang out in purgatory very long. And indulgences, once again, yes, they're still part of the Roman Catholic Church. The issue during this time was that these indulgences were being sold to raise money for the building of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Now, I have to admit, having seen St. Peter's Basilica, and, right now, it's the strangest thing. I'm telling you, this virus is the strangest thing. I don't know if you watch the news, but they always, when they talk about Italy, they show the Vatican. They show the courtyard of the Vatican, which is normally just wall-to-wall humanity. It's a ghost town. In fact, St. Peter's Basilica itself is closed. But anyway, getting back to it, St. Peter's Basilica, I hope one day you get to see it. I really do. I hope one day I get to see it, because it is the most incredible man-made object I have ever seen in my entire life. And I've seen some stuff, and I like art. I like beautiful things, particularly man-made things. But yeah, St. Peter's Basilica there's no contest. Number 2 is Louis XIV's Palace of Versailles, but number 1 by a mile, St. Peter's Basilica. It is so immense, enormous, and then it is so decorated with art, decorated with and they did not spare the cost. Everything's marble, everything's gold leaf, everything's bronze. The giant paintings that line, and I mean giant, the size of the wall of our gym, are not really paintings, they're mosaics, so that they haven't faded from day one. And then, of course, it has cute little pieces of art in it, such as Michelangelo's Pietà. It has, of course, the painting of the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, the Last Judgment. It has Bernini's altarpiece in it, which I'm going to send you some pictures of that. But Bernini's altarpiece, and Bernini's altarpiece stands 100 feet tall. 100 feet tall, and it doesn't touch the roof of St. Peter's Basilica. And, it has all that kind of stuff in it. And so, it's terrible that the church was obviously not doing a good thing by selling indulgences. Everyone, even the Roman Catholic Church today, agrees that was not a good thing. But man, you need to see that place. I mean, it is just incredible. I hope that nothing ever happens to that building. It is just a monument to what can be done. Yes, and I'm sorry. So anyway, yeah, the sale of indulgences went towards the construction of this ginormous church that today still stands in Vatican City in the middle of Rome. And please go see it. If you have a chance to choose between Panama City Beach and St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, yeah. Anyway, oh yes, there was also the small matter that even though these indulgences could be bought, and by the way, the indulgences, not only could you buy them for yourself, your wife, you could buy them for members of your family that were already dead. And who wouldn't want to get mom and dad out of purgatory for a while? Shorten their time in purgatory. Once again, it was a great marketing ploy. I mean, between the Crusades and the sale of indulgences, the Roman Catholic Church, knew how to market stuff. Quite ingenious. But anyway, probably the worst thing was that even with the sale of indulgences, and by the way, the top of the next page asks the question, who was Johann Tetzel? Johann Tetzel, whose name will be on your test, and I am converting your test to Mastery Connect, so that will be coming. Johann Tetzel was the salesman in the region of Wittenberg, which is where Martin Luther lived. And but here was the problem. As it says there was a small matter that, yes, selling indulgences, you can talk about whether or not indulgences are real or not, whether or not, all day if you want. And then they sold them. That's terrible. But here's the biggest thing of all. The people who sold them made it quite clear that, they just wanted the money. For example, Johann Tetzel, he didn't even stop to say, oh yeah, wait. Aside from buying the indulgences, it'd be really kind of cool since you're buying what you're buying up or paying for or receiving forgiveness of your sins. It would be cool if you were like sorry for those sins. Yeah, they kind of left that out of the equation. So yeah. But anyway, yeah. Not a good thing, right? And so yeah, that's where all this comes to a head. Martin Luther understood that with the church doing this, that the church they didn't care about. They didn't care about sin. They didn't care about getting you time out of purgatory. The church cared about, putting money in the bank. And so, or at least towards the construction of that. And that's when Martin Luther he has had enough. And we are going to start tomorrow with Roman numeral 1. I've talked 30 minutes now. We're going to start with Roman numeral 1 tomorrow, where we talk about Martin Luther and his nailing of the 95 Theses on the door of the Church of Wittenberg. On October 31st, wait a minute, October 31st, 1517. 3 years ago, the only time I've ever dressed up on Halloween, can you see that? Okay. The only time I ever dressed up on Halloween was as Martin Luther. Because 3 years ago, it was the 500th anniversary of the Martin Luther's nailing of the 95 Theses on the door of the Church of Wittenberg. Which, I mean, religiosity aside, it really is a very important moment in the annals of Western civilization, because it does start all kind of things. For one thing, well, we'll talk about that, but education. I'm gonna go now. Some of you guys will be getting phone calls from me later on today. I just want to check in as I'm required to, and I'm over my angriness now, and we're gonna have great conversations. But yes, I will see you tomorrow. Bye for now.